APUS government students, I want to start by having you look on page 129 in your green packet. We're going to take our final quiz of the year tomorrow. So I want to make sure that you have what you need to have success on that quiz for Friday before we do the activity. The things to focus on page 129, things to highlight, and I think that you saw this, you continue to see this as they finalize the vote counts and certify and whatnot, is that voting and voting laws in terms of federalism, it's a reserved power. So it is state law, state control. Yes, they have to follow the Constitution, the amendments I'll show you, here in the lecture, but by and large, as long as they do that, it's up to states and states' laws in terms of how it is that they want to conduct their voting. All right, we dive into a couple more of these, and you can find these in the reading here. So lobbyists, so lobbyists, those are the people. Think of lobbyists as people who are hired by, let's say, interest groups, different groups that are out there that go to Congress, and they certainly have to identify themselves with the federal government, but then they can work with those in Congress, talk to them, convince them why they should vote or not vote a certain way on an issue. So I could be a lobbyist for the tobacco industry, or a lobbyist for marijuana rights, or a lobbyist for you fill in the blank from there. And I am going to be going to Congress and convincing them to pass or not pass or support specific policies dealing with the interests that I represent. So they tie hand in hand with interest groups. So interest groups who have an interest. We've talked about them a little bit already. So nothing to really blow you out of the water there. If you then move down to the others that I've not given you there, rational choice voting. So looking at a candidate and thinking, who is going to do the best for me? Rational choice voting. Who is going to do the best for me in my beliefs? Retrospective voting, that would be me going back and looking and seeing what Donald Trump has done the last 4 years, and do I vote for him again? Looking back. Prospective voting would be, okay, now as I think about the next 4 years, the things that I want to have happen, is Donald Trump going to be the person that I want for that office looking forward? Finally then, party line voting. That is, as you can see there, party line. I'm going to vote for Democrats. I'm going to vote for Republicans because that's who and what I am. All right, the rest of those, just a couple of those that I want to highlight there for your quiz then. So political action committees, those are groups that are formed, and an interest group can put these together, a small group of people can put these together, but basically you're putting together a group in order to influence elections. You're going to pool your money. You may do campaign ads, you may do leaflets, you may do whatever it is that you want to do, but you're going to try and influence a election, a campaign. All right? So you can see that there. The difference between a political action committee and then a super political action committee there at the bottom is that as long as we don't set up ourselves and align ourselves with a campaign or a party, we can gain unlimited amounts of money. If I wanted to give Donald Trump money for this election cycle, the federal law says I can only give him so much. Any individual can only give so much to a party or to a candidate. That's been set forth by that BCRA that is about 3 down from the bottom. However, what has evolved from them with the Citizens United case is that if I am not aligned with a party or a candidate, me and those in that super PAC, we can have unlimited amounts of money. Unlimited amounts of money. Okay? I think that should help you there for your quiz. Let's go ahead and get the lecture 7.4 stuff. So here's the amendments then on page 130 for you to fill in. Again, much of this is state laws, but obviously you have to follow the Constitution. Okay, so nothing mind-blowing here. You can see 15th, 17th, 19th, 24th, and 26th. So go ahead and get those down. Voter turnout in the United States. So criticisms of voter turnout in the United States. Certainly we've had a struggle in the last 100 years for certain demographics having voting rights, whether it be women who have only had voting rights for 100 years, minorities and their struggles, which we've seen with the civil rights movement. You can see there for number 2, we have unfortunately one of the lowest voter turnouts in the world. Now, I want to caveat that by saying, well, as you look at some of those nations on there have what I would say compulsory voting, meaning that if they don't vote, they may get penalized with a tax or something. Now, they don't throw people in jail in these places for not voting, but you know, you may see a tax if you don't show up to vote. So we don't do that. That's not something that Americans believe in. But if you see that we're creeping up to maybe about 70% in 2020, I think we're doing quite a bit better than we have. I think, unfortunately, with this bar chart that you're looking at here, I think this throws in midterms, which midterms really throws a wrench into our overall voter turnout. I'll show you that on the next slide. And you saw this with number 3. Little uniformity across our states. This is that, greatness, or you can call it, mind-numbing, hair-pulling out issue within federalism. 50 states, 50 election laws, little uniformity. Number 1 there. Your answer there is E. The voter participation rate is one of the lowest of any of the industrialized world. Hopefully we continue to work on that. So who does vote? Let's look at that. So 60 plus in presidential years. We're now moving on to page 131. I think we're going to be close to 68 to 70 with what we saw for 2020. Unfortunately, we have so many important issues that come forward in what are known as midterms. So like 2022 will be a midterm, 2026 will be a midterm. In the middle of a president's term, we have everybody in the House is up for re-election, a third of the folks in the Senate are up for re-election, a number of local issues up there, a governor may be up on there. So a lot of different things are important, but you can see usually in the 30s in the United States in these midterms. So you can see that sort of ebb and flow of the tide in terms of voting up and down across our country. So you can see in 2016, our last presidential election, 61%. I think we're going to blow that out of the water. I think we're going to be in the upper 60s for 2020. 2018 down to 46%, though that had been higher than a lot of other midterms. And I think you're going to see something around 70 for 2020. As you look at who votes in terms of age and education, you can get those arrows down there on page 131. Shouldn't be a surprise here to you. As age increases, the likelihood to vote increases. I'll show you a demographic of that on the next slide. And the opposite is true. The lower a person's age is, the less likely they are to vote. We'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second. And that's something that you need to realize, recognize, and that's something that you need to battle as you get into the 18 to 24-year-old demographic here in the coming years. Additionally, education. The less education someone has, the less likely they are to vote. I know this is something that I talked to my students about in 2016. For whatever reason, there was a strong and continues to be a strong likelihood of people that have a less education that are drawn to Donald Trump. The statistics show that. And I said to my students in 2016, well, he's going to have to buck that trend to beat Hillary Clinton because the less educated don't usually show up to vote. And oh, did they in 2016? And I think you could argue they did again in 2020. It just so happened that more showed up to vote for Joe Biden. Number 2 there, which of the following statements about voting behavior in national elections is most accurate? Again, E. Senior citizens are more likely to vote than college students. All right, let's move then to page 132. But before we do that, I'm just going to show you this here quick. So again, you can see as people tend to get older, the likelihood of them to vote grows. All right. So you can see that, but that continues to grow, I think, and hope with your generation. On the right-hand side there, then look at that. Those with no diploma, about 40%. Those with advanced degrees, almost twice that. Almost twice that. Though these lower down here high school graduates, this group, that's a larger share of the American populace than it is those with advanced degrees. Still here, nothing to write down, but this is something I want to show you in terms of you being millennials. You're a group that's increasing, one of the few that's increasing in your likelihood to vote. Now you can see there, excuse me, on the left, it's not a real big tick, but it's a tick up. So, and I hope that's something that we continue to see to trend up. The one on the right is the one that kind of jumped out the page to me as I found that for you. So you can see that for the first time in American history, you can see that my generation, Gen X, Gen Z, in between you and me, and then you as millennials, you can see that we actually outvoted our grandparents, the boomers and prior generations for the first time in 2018. So you can see that. Now, I think unfortunately you could argue part of that downward trend for the boomer and prior generations is because a number of them are dying, which is certainly unfortunate, but that's life. But that's a huge jump with our generations that we can hope to continue to see in the future. Eligibility and registration, so that's there on page 132. Nothing to really, nothing that you shouldn't probably already know. The one thing you might not know is the issue with felons. It's one of those state issues where if you're a felon, you can lose the right to vote. In some states in the past, you would lose it for life. In Nebraska, I know that it's a 2-year loss. So you could, interestingly enough, move to a different state, be a felon, and lose or gain your right to vote, which is quite strange. But again, welcome to state laws ruling elections and voting and federalism. A registration also differs from state to state. Some states will let you show up, register to vote, and vote. That's called same-day registration. Nebraska does not have that. We have the third Friday before the election as our deadline, which allows our county and state officials to get everything set up, the voter rolls and whatnot. This time around it was about 25 days. So within about a month, you have to get your stuff set up to be registered to vote. And that's one of the issues here is I want to kind of finish up with you guys is that, it's an issue for college students. I mean, do you vote by mail in your home state if you move somewhere new? Do you register in your new college state? And the answer is you can do either. You can do either. But the main thing is that here in a couple of years for 2022, do one or the other. Do one or the other so that you can vote. All right, voter behavior. I'm kind of running out of time here, so you can go ahead and get this. I already talked about this in the vocab, so I'm going to blow through this here quick. This is then just getting to incumbents. They get reelected at a huge rate. And this then is just showing you the incumbent advantages, so you can get that down, and I'll talk more about that tomorrow. We'll see you soon.